Hello friends, welcome back to my studio. Hope you're well. I had so much fun last week and I hope you really enjoyed watching, and I thought I'd do some more, so it's almost like a part 2, I guess. I'm working again with these ColourCraft crystallized watercolor powders, and what I thought I would try this week is actually mixing the powder up into a paint. So I'll play around, I might add it into some matte medium or mix it with water, and now that I know that it definitely comes off the plate really well, I thought I'd just play around with some abstract landscapes and using this as a paint. Who knows what will happen? Let's have a look. If you haven't seen last week's vlog yet, this is one of the papers I made, and this is the, if I can find it, the the last one I pick up, the sea green. And you can see how all the little dots of the powder are there, and it hasn't really blended. And I did get it to blend a little bit with the matte medium on the plate, but today, as I said, is focused on getting these more into a liquid paint form and seeing what they do. So I decide first off to just spritz it with water just to see what a very fine wash would do. Obviously, I know it's going to bead a lot. The thinner, finer the paint is, the more it does bead on the plate. It's almost like a resist, the water versus the synthetic plate. And yeah, you can see it is beading, and it's not holding its structure very well at all, as expected. But you've just got to play with these things and see. Yeah, it is so wet. I don't get anything at all. For so much water on there, it just really disperses. And so I'm just really trying to mop up all the water and the mess and not tear the paper while I'm lifting it off. It'd be, once it's dry, very nice transparent paper to use, but not something that I'm going to want to continue on the gel plate. So I decided to mix it with some medium to give a much thicker consistency. So that's what I'm doing here. Mixes in really well. It's very easy to get it to disperse. And I don't think there's much of a colour change in that either. It's holding the colour quite well, which I would expect because they're so pigmented, these pigments. And you can see that's holding its structure much more, and I'm able to get some line. It is still beading a lot, and the longer I leave it there, you can see it resisting and beading up. But it gives quite a nice texture, and it's quite a nice little print. Good to know if I wanted this, that's the way to achieve it, but not something that I'm looking for today. Oh, and I decide to punch these holes into the top of these lids. I'm sick of trying to get the lids off, but I think what I need is much larger push pins. The hole is, well, I obviously need it fine enough that it's not going to let too much of the pigment out. I need some to come out. So I'm just trying to see what I've actually got on the plate, if anything. And again, just a wet mess. I think it's important to show these, not really failures, they're learning opportunities, aren't they? They're lessons. And now I know that's what it does, and now you all know. If you hadn't known before, you know what it does. So try now, of course, with the, as you can see, with the roller. And it's spreading quite well. There's perhaps a little bit of moisture on the plate, so it's beading there at the top. And then there, the longer I leave it, you can see it's just beading more and more. It's quite nice, the what's left with the roll-off roller there. So I'm going to a thicker paper so I can absorb more of the water that's in the mix. And yeah, it's not doing anything that I want it to do. I'm certainly not having as much fun this week as I did last week. So back with the fluid acrylics. This is the Titan Mars Pale. And it is a little bit harder to roll out because, as I said, there's perhaps a little bit of water still on the plate as well after that last pull, because I didn't get it all. And so it's beading a bit. And you can see it didn't bead. If you've watched last week, it didn't bead last week. So I'm having a little bit of trouble having left the plate with that moisture on. But I wondered what the paint might do with some acrylic down, even though it's fluid, with some thicker paint down, and what the watercolour mix might do. And it hasn't really helped. It's still very, very wet. So going in again with some fluid acrylic over the top of all of that. I haven't dried the plate off. I'm just hoping that that beading will just work its way out as I just pull more and more prints. Oh, I'm still just so in love with that. Quinn Nicolazzo. Again, that's the cotton paper that I'm using, very absorbent paper, sticks to the plate quite well too. So you can see it just helps pull everything off. And that's a lovely background paper. So experimenting again, I've mixing the matte medium on the plate with a little bit of the powder, seeing if that changes anything rather than having it mixed in the little tub. Plus I don't have any more little tubs, so I'm just kind of mixing this in and again seeing, just exploring what happens when. I'm certainly not attached to getting anything out of today, and I think I got much better results last week, but you never know until you have a go, do you? So yeah, that was a very, very fine wash. So I'm sprinkling on a bit more of the powdered pigment. There's not a lot coming out of these little pinholes, and so I'm trying to disperse it with a little bit of water. I've just put a tiny spritz there, and then I'm just breaking up the pigment, as you can see, to try and get it so it's not in that powdered form. It's actually in well, it's not quite a paint, it's not quite a watercolour because it's very diluted. But anyway, try and pick this up. And yeah, safe to say I'm not having a lot of fun in the studio by this point. not because I'm disappointed in anything, that not, you know, it's not necessarily about whether it's working or not, but nothing's happening that I'm going, oh wow, nothing's kind of making my heart sing, nothing's really inspiring me. So yeah, it's all a little bit flat, I guess. And here's this print coming up, and it's a bit of a smudge where it was a bit thick, and I like the two colour combinations together, but as prints go, it's not a great deal happening. So I bring out the acrylic paint and this smaller roller. I didn't use it last week, so just again wanting to see what this can do, because I'm not wanting to spread out across the whole plate. This little roller is used in etching, and I can leave a link in the description if you like. It's nice to have different size rollers for different size plates too, I guess, and also the fact that I'm wanting to keep these colours quite separate, and this little roller is allowing me to do that. Trying not to blend the colours too much. So that's an antique green mix that I've got, and the mix of my Venetian red with white, titanium white, and this is the Payne's grey, which of course is quite blue. Or is that the Prussian blue? No, I think it's the Payne's grey. No, it looks like Prussian blue. So I guess I'm thinking landscape and a little bit of what happened last week when I blocked in a little bit. I'm still persisting with this water. I don't know why. It's just too wet. But I guess I'm trying to make something happen. And yeah, it's even less successful than with the rose red before. So I decided to just kind of mop that up. And then as I'm doing that, I pick up a little bit of this paint, and then that makes me go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's do a little bit of that. So that's where playing and not having a set intention and just going in with your curiosity awake and having that question, what happens if? And that's what happens when you dab that rag, so that, you know, the shop towel. So I really like that. So I'm like, okay, what marks can I make with the paint now? Let's get really loose and free. Let's mix this up. Let's get something going. Repeating what I learnt from the last one, bit of dabbing rather than using the roller. And then I'm just there now building the colours for the landscape. You can see that thicker acrylic paint is a little bit harder to spread, and I've picked up accidentally some of the blue. It's making a really nice pattern and mark in there, so I'm not fussed at all, just blending it a little bit but trying to keep some of it there. And then this is this Venetian red with the white mixed in, and I'm using that little silicone brush and seeing if I can kind of be a bit more painterly, get a few more active marks going rather than that flatness of that the roller gives. And I'm really happy because this works out. Spoiler alert, this works out really, really good. The little silicone tool does seem to wipe as much paint off as it does apply it, so paintbrush might be better. But here we go, I've gone over that yellow background and look at that. I love this. I love this so much. So where I've put on with the tool, it's a little bit thick, so I'm just getting a brush and just kind of blending that, spreading that out a little bit. There's a little bit of mottled texture that you might be able to see on your screen, so that's what I'm doing there. That could be the best print of the day, but it's got me excited and I'm going to do more. So I'm just going over, trying to give a background to this to see if I could pick up the rest of what's on the plate. It is a little bit wet, as you can see, so it's blending a little bit too much. I don't have any patience. If you're a regular, you know I don't have patience to let this stuff dry. So yeah, let's see what comes up from this. And it does end up picking up a fair amount, and really, again, really happy. It's more subtle than the last one, but yeah, it's lovely. So now I'm just, because this is a bit of a mess, this paper, I'm just trying to pick up what I can off the plate. And I know this fine Japanese paper does pick up quite a lot off the plate, as does the cotton paper. So yeah, nothing going on there, but the plate's nice and clean. So again, with the matte medium and spreading it with the roller, of course, rather than the paintbrush. Not bothered that there's a little bit of paint still on there. I'm just trying to make those holes a little bit bigger so I can get a little bit more pigment out of what is now like a salt shaker. And using that technique that I discovered last week of blending with the roller, and you can see there's a lot less pigment there, so it's certainly working having the pinhole. But yeah, I'll have to look at getting, you know, you can get those really big fat push pins, and I think that's what I'll do for next time, to make that hole just that little bit bigger so it can deliver a little bit more pigment. So I'm really kind of like painting like I would on a canvas now. I'm a little bit hesitant to use a brush because I'm worried about damaging the plate, which is why I'm persisting with the silicone tool. And I really liked the loose marks of that Prussian blue, so I'm really trying to be very gestural and have a lot of marks, but it's not covering as well, of course, so I'm coming in with the roller a little bit to give a little bit of a blend and coverage. And we're back with the cotton paper, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Quite like that little corner though, that if it was cropped in there, it could be quite nice. And then I'm going to see, because that's quite mottled, see if I can get anything more up on this paper too. That's what's lovely, isn't it, about gel printing, that you can just go layer upon layer of these things. And yeah, you can also not get too much out of it, but you can, as you would have seen last week, if you go for it, you can get some really lovely things happening with the layers. So loading the plate up again with the Quin Nickel Azo. I'm going to have to find what shops still have this on their shelves and hoard some. Hasn't quite got the glow of the Azo. There's some nice areas of that. I don't like the blue, but there's some nice areas of that. So here's these papers that I created last week, and they're the ones I've decided aren't working, so I'm going to start to use those. And you can see I'm moving more away from the pigments and more into this kind of painterly effect with the thicker acrylics. Really love this combination of the pink and the green. And then this quite stark contrast with this much darker, more saturated Prussian blue. Got quite a strong horizontal line on this print. But I start to look at that and think it's like a rock in the landscape. So yeah, this is the Venetian Red, which I've talked about a lot before. It's a deep earth colour, and it's got a lot of titanium white in it to get it to be that nice kind of baby pink, which I love. I love my pinks and mauves. So I really liked that rock shape, and it also reminded me a lot of a nest. And quite a while ago, one Easter, I did a vlog on, I think it might be called Easter inspired gel plate prints. And I use these little eggs here that I cut out as a masking tool. You've probably seen them sitting to the side there. They've just hung around. I will link the video on the screen and in the description. And don't they look sweet just like that? But yeah, I'm now, like, I came in to play with pigments, and I'm now creating little nest paintings. And so a bit like you would use a stencil, I guess, the little pieces of paper there are masking out so the paper can't pick up the paint that's beneath them, obviously. And when I pull them up, I love these little marks that are on them, the back side of them, the little blue where it has, they've picked up the paint that was beneath them. So as I'm making this next nest, I'm thinking about where the eggs are going and hoping that the paint is wet enough that I will be able to pick up this paint off them. But of course, it all just gets blended in with the blue nest that I already had. So how about a pink nest? And I have decided to use a brush. I'm using, this is a Renoir brush from Bunnings. Bunnings is a warehouse in Australia, a big hardware store. And they sell these cheap, they're quite cheap, and I wasn't sure how they'd go. And they're actually quite nice. They're a very soft bristled brush, almost like a watercolour brush, but they're a square flat brush. And they're not hurting the plate at all, so I'm reaching for those to apply the paint. Yeah, Not quite there, but I think I can do a little bit of work over that and bring that to what I've got in my head. So I'm now more intentionally working. And I wondered if I painted the eggs, whether I could get them like a stamp to be in this nest. And again, it doesn't work out so well. Unfortunately, they're just a little bit flat. But again, as you'll see later on, I go over these and get something out of them. Because they're flat, I thought, okay, I'll put a little bit of pigment on, hoping that the pigment will spread a little bit and look like little speckled eggs. But it doesn't really work. And that's okay. So I decide, let's put the mask down first and I'll paint around these, and then they will be much more defined on the plate. And I'll just speed this footage up because you can see what I'm doing as I did before, just trying to get marks that look like a nest, lots of twigs and different directions, but still keeping that nest shape. And I'm using a bit of green over the blue as well. And coming over with this pink and the sea green from last week, and yeah, that's given me much more defined eggs. And I was hoping that that sea green would give me that speckled look to the eggs. And so now I'm just painting out, masking off the sea green that's outside of the nest to see if I can get the focus to be on these little eggs. And again, just speeding up the footage because you can see quite obviously what I'm doing. Little fine brush, and yeah, quite successful. So because it's a success, here I go again, doing the same sort of thing and just being a bit more particular about getting that paint right up against the eggs. And I'm just filling in the background with a little bit of green, and I'm letting the roller pick up a little bit to give a little bit of texture. And then I decide to go over this, thinking about the speckled dots on the paper and hoping that they will be little eggs. And this is probably the most successful of that. Not sure whether it should go upside down that way or that way because of that darker area on the top. So I decide to put some blue just in the top area here so I can try and block out that darker mass and have more of a sky suggested above the nest. So trying to get the registration right, going over the same, trying to not cover up those eggs too much. And I try and just rub up the top as well so I don't disturb those eggs. And yeah, it's blocked it out. It's still dark, of course, but yeah. So going over the whole top of this, seeing what I can pick up. And that now looks like a little branch. So I decide to bring out these marker pens and accentuate the fact that that is a branch that the nest is sitting on. Of course, the eggs would fall out of the nest if they were perched on this branch, but I just thought it was nice to do a little bit of line work. And this is another fine liner pen, and it's a yellow ochre type colour, so it will stand out against that bluey green rather than using a green for the leaves. And yeah, I'm just kind of playing around, putting some leaf shapes in, and yeah, it's quite fun. And then to give that a little bit of interest, I'm doing the same thing, just coming around the nest with some very mottled pink. And I've got a little bit too much there, so I'm just lifting some off because I just want it to be a bit mottled. I don't want it to cover the whole lot. And I decided to just do a little bit more line work with a paintbrush with that same paint to give me a better definition of the nest. I'm sorry if this is going too fast for you. I'll slow this footage down again now for a bit. And I'm using the yellow ochre watercolour pigment in the matte medium to give this highlight to these eggs. So when I began today, this is not how I thought I would be using this pigment. And here's a show and tell of the finished pieces. And this was an epic fail. Lovely watercolour wash, not for the gel plate. As you saw, it really beaded up because the gel plate and the amount of oil, because it's a synthetic plate, resists water. So if you want that effect, definitely that's a great way to get it. This improved somewhat with these marks. Very nice marks, not a great print. Yeah, it's a bit all one value, but a good play. Another kind of epic fail, although this bit here is quite interesting. If I cropped that, you see there, if I cropped that as an image, quite interesting. Love this one. And those marks there led to the rest of the day. Another great one. And then of course those marks led to these little nests. So they're still a little bit wet. Who knew when I started today that I was going to be doing nests? I do have these little eggs. You've probably seen them sitting in the tripod from way back when, and I'll leave a link in the description about an Easter inspired day I did with the gel plate, just having a play. So I knew those, I had used that before and I knew that would work. And some are more successful than others. There's a lot I like about this. The eggs are very hidden though. And yeah, trying to pick up the speckles. I think I did this one first. It's just over here because it's still a bit wet. Not as successful. The eggs aren't defined, but I could go over with pen and define that. This one, yeah, finally found a way to use those speckles. So there we go. If I wanted to use that powdered pigment to get a speckled egg effect or something else you might be doing, it's a nice technique now that I have in the repertoire. And this one, the final one of the day, is not a surprise that the last one if you stop before you're too tired, I guess. Not a surprise that this one is so lovely. So it's not normal for me to do drawing, but it just looked like it needed to be on a branch, and a little bit of colour, more colour into the eggs, which is certainly what I could do with some of the others. I think that would pick them up. So look at the results of when you just let go in the studio, don't have an intention, just go in and say, what are my materials going to do? What can this plate do? What can this do? And yeah, I started off saying I was going to paint and print with the powdered pigment as a paint medium, and I've finished the day painting it and using it, but not in the way that I expected at all. As always, I hope this inspires you to get into your art space and play and just see what happens. It's so much fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely week, and I shall see you next week. Bye.